Yawn meeting. So much.
Google Fi, a phone plan by Google. It's easy to switch to Fi from the comfort of your home. Purchase a new phone or use the phone you have. Then set up your phone plan from home in just minutes. Only pay for the data you use with Google Fi's flexible plan. So when you're on Wi-Fi a lot and don't need as much data, you'll only pay $10 per gigabyte used. All without contracts or hidden fees. Sign up at fi.google.com.
It's hard to believe that Mint Mobile has never had an unlimited plan. To break this revolutionary news, we brought in Paul Revere's real descendant, Avery Revere.
Unlimited is coming. Unlimited is coming to Mint Mobile for just $30.
That was worth it, I think. That was definitely worth it. It's probably not going to be better on horseback, though, even if the deposit is non-refundable.
I'm not getting on a horse, Ryan.
Of course you're not, Avery. Do you want to try the bell?
Hello everyone, welcome back to TechnoOvo. My name's Steph and today I'm running through a quick tutorial on how you can stream with your friends on OneStream, and by that I mean have a multi-webcam setup so you can all appear on one stream, on one feed. I wanted to run through this tutorial because I haven't seen many people do this before on YouTube. There are multicam stream tutorials that you can use which require you to plug in multiple cameras to your computer through a capture card or USB, webcam style, that kind of thing. But I just want to show you how you can do that with your friends. So when you're playing party games on your stream, like, I don't know, Gang Beasts for example, then where all your characters are on screen at one point, at one time, then you can also have all of your faces on there as well. And plus, because of this COVID-19 business is going on, we're all in lockdown anyway, so people are probably playing a lot more video games than they generally would. So you can play with your friends, you can stream with your friends, and hopefully you can get through this time with some party gameplay. So let me jump straight into the tutorial and we'll start cracking on. Okay, so welcome to the TechnoOvo OBS. We are using OBS Studio at the moment. We were going to be using Streamlabs, but I'm used to OBS, so this is the reason I use OBS. Now, as you can see on the left-hand side, I have got a number of scenes that are set up for me already, including one for the 3-split camera, but I'm not going to show you that. We're going to start from scratch. So, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to call this test split camera, and I'm going to set up a new scene by clicking this plus button in underneath the scenes box. And so you're going to be greeted with something that looks like this. Now, at this point, you are going to want some kind of overlay. Now, I've already built one for the TechnoOvo stream. So if I go to image import, and let's call this image split test. And then you can browse on your hard drive where your images are saved. So at the moment I've got a Twitch and Mixer folder with all of our stuff in here, and there is my 3-man stream background, which looks very much like this. So the big box is where the game is going to play, and then you've got 3 different boxes for our cameras. Now, what you're going to need to do to split up the cameras so your friends are in, or whoever you are, your colleagues are in these boxes here, is you're going to need some kind of video calling software. Now, we use Discord, and there is a way of getting webcam usage on Discord. So if I click on here now, you can see I'm actually talking. I'm waving to the camera right now just to prove that I'm live. Just checking my monitors to see if I am actually recording and I'm live. But as you can see, here's Joe and here's Nick as well. So I can't stress enough, this is an important step to this process, is you need to make sure that this window stays at the size that you actually set it to. So at the moment I've got it set to this window, and I will show you an example on why in a moment at the end of creating our scene. So I'm just going to move this window now over to my second monitor so it's out of the way. There we go. Now we're on the second monitor. What I need to do is I need to add 3 different scenes for the Discord window. Now I do that as a window capture. So let's call this Discord test 1. Create a new scene. Window, I need to choose stream channel Discord. There you go. And there you can see that I can now resize this window like so. Resize that and position that. Now what you can do, if you hold down the Alt button on your keyboard, you can change the cropping on the actual window. So what I would need to do is I would need to crop myself out. If I can grab that corner with the Alt key, I would need to crop myself out so there is nothing else in that window. This is still the Discord window, but now there is nothing else in that window because I've cropped it out. Now that needs to live underneath, it doesn't have to, but I like to have my webcam windows live underneath my overlay, simply because I can start cropping inside the actual windows themselves that I've made for the webcams. Now this, as I say, this can change depending on the types of webcams or cameras that your friends or colleagues have. But at the moment I'm in position 1. As you can see, I'm up here in position 1 waving. So now I need to come back down and bring in a new window capture. So let's call this Discord test 2. And I need to select, at the moment it's selecting Streamlabs, but I need to again select Discord. Click OK on that. Bring the size down a little bit, just so I can see what I'm working with. And now if I hold down the Alt key again, and then crop out the second camera on there, like so. Place that underneath wherever, as long as it's underneath the background, and then I can position that underneath there as well. Now, of course, there is no one on there. Nick and Joe aren't actually in front of their PCs at the moment, so there's no one actually there. And then again, the same thing, Discord test 3. Select Discord, click OK. Make it a size so you can see what you're working with, and again crop out the third camera like so. Place it underneath again, change it to whatever size you want to change it to, and then, as I said, again you can make these boxes as big or as small as you like. But that's pretty much it. Now, the biggest thing, the biggest notice, as I say, I mentioned at the beginning, is this box now, the Discord window, is OBS is tracking how big that Discord window is, okay? So if I then start moving around the Discord window, things start to go a little awry. So that's why I said it's so important that you keep the Discord window at the size that you told it to be inside of OBS or Streamlabs or whichever software you're using. So that cannot change. And again, the same kind of thing, if a camera gets turned off, a camera goes missing, okay? But then because of the way that the camera boxes are laid out in OBS, you just get this blank box here. And again, if I turn it on, the cameras come back, so everything gets shuffled around. So that is pretty much it. The only other thing that you will probably need to do to this is stick a game capture on there. Now, I haven't got a game open at the moment. Should we get a game open? Let's get a game open. We're going to do that now. As you can see, I have opened a game of Gang Beasts, so let's just get to the main menu of Gang Beasts. Oh, there you go. It's actually opened in a window for some reason. Not sure why. Let's get the game sound turned down because that is very loud at the moment. Let's get that turned down to where I usually have it. Okay, save settings, yes. And I want to make this full screen as well, just to show you. Save settings. There you go. So now it's actually full screen. Let's submit that. Let's go back, back. Let's start a local game. I can't submit, probably because I've got my Xbox controller plugged in, but my Xbox controller isn't picking up. But that doesn't actually matter. What matters is now that we need to pull in the game screen from, let's call this game capture test. And let's pull in capture specific window. Let's capture Gang Beasts. Give that a couple of seconds to load. And of course it loads super massive because of the resolution of my desktop. But let's pull that and drag that down to a suitable size. there you go. Keep dragging, keep dragging, keep dragging until you get to a suitable size for your window. So again, if you stick that under the image test, you have got something that looks like that. So then all three of you can appear on screen at any one time. You can play your game in the middle. Now, there are ways of being able to capture multiple game windows, but that is a lot more in depth. That means several of you are going to have to stream your content somewhere, either to Twitch, Mixer, or to an unlisted YouTube stream or something like that. And then every time you go into the stream, then you're going to have to change and align the windows every single time. But there's a lot more testing to that. But certainly on games, as I say, like Gang Beasts, I mean, we played Hell Let Loose the other day on stream. And it captured one window, but you could see all of us talking. It just makes it a little bit more personable when you're streaming in front of an audience and they can see everyone speaking. And I know there are services on Mixer and Twitch and things like that that now do squad streams and team streams and things like that, but it just makes one stream with multiple faces. Even if you're playing a game of, I don't know, Dungeons and Dragons online, tabletop simulator style Dungeons and Dragons, you can put everyone's face on there and you can design a really nice overlay. But that is pretty much how you set up a squad stream. So there we go. That was my first ever tutorial on the TechNuovo channel. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you learned something. Please leave any feedback down below as well, and let me know if there was anything you'd like to see changed in tutorials like this, or if there's anything that I could have done to improve it. That would be absolutely awesome if you could let me know. I also stream over on Mixer. You can find me, TechNuovo. There'll be a link in the description down below to this video of my stream, where you can find me, Nick and Joe, streaming several days a week over there. We kind of just jump on randomly at the moment, but certainly come and check it out. It's quite a lot of fun we have over there. If there's anything as well that you would like to know about streaming, I'm not an expert at this point, but I could certainly try and help out if you are having a bit of an issue with setting up your stream or trying to do some weird and wonderful things on streaming as well. I'm hoping to bring a few more tutorials as well over sort of the future of this channel, because actually I enjoyed making this. I really did. It's nice and simple, and hopefully it teaches people out there how to stream and how to do certain things on streams as well. So thank you. Thanks for watching if you've made it this far. That's for sure. Thank you very much. So thank you very much for checking out my tutorial on how to squad stream in a single streaming window. If you enjoyed this video, then do click that like button. Please subscribe to keep up with our latest tech, gaming and tutorial videos now. I can maybe start saying tutorial videos depending on if I do any more. Please leave a comment down below, let us know what you think, and also come and check us out streaming over on Mixer, which is at TechNuovo. Again, a link in the description down below as well. And also please share with your friends. Please share this video with your friends. So if they're streamers and you want to jump on stream with them and you got a set of webcams, why not share it? Share it around. Get streaming. We're in lockdown at the moment here in the UK, and streaming is actually helping with that and helping us not go too crazy in this time and losing our minds and being bored and all of that kind of things that's going on in the UK. And also, don't go outside. Stay inside. Start streaming. Stay safe as well. And wash your hands. As I say, thanks very much for watching, and we will see you in the next video.
I mean, we basically just only have the boxes in front of the fireplace now to handle.
Google Fi, a phone plan by Google. Stay connected with full-speed hotspot tethering. So no Wi-Fi? No problem. You'll have the coverage you need for streaming, surfing, video conferencing, and staying social. Plus, you can keep in touch with loved ones near or around the world. Call 50-plus global destinations at no additional cost with the Fi Unlimited plan. There are no strings attached. Join or cancel Google Fi anytime from the comfort of your home. Get the unlimited plan at fi.google.com.
That would be nice. I'm capable of putting 25 in the jar, except
Grammarly does more than catch errors. With Grammarly, you can find really good, no, perfect words that make your writing sharp, or explicit, or excellent, or distinctive. As a matter of fact, for what it's worth, Grammarly can, yeah, that's long. We can get rid of that, and this, good, and this, or how about this? Grammarly helps you be concise. If your tone might make someone feel like this, Grammarly can remind you. It would help if you soften your tone. And if you need the support, Grammarly encourages you to write confidently. Because the better we all communicate, the better we connect. Grammarly, helping you connect. Go to Grammarly.com and download today.
You can submit DJ's computer to the side.
Hello my YouTube friends, today I'm going to tell you how to add a guest in OBS for your live streams. It's probably the most asked question I ever get, so let's get to it. If you want more tools, tips, and tricks that can help make you a better YouTuber, subscribe to the channel and click that bell so you know when we have new content that comes out. The first thing I want to show you how to do is create an overlay for your live guests in OBS. And I'm going to show you how to create the overlay in Pixlr X. Pixlr X is a free image manipulation software that anyone can use right from their browser. The link is in the description if you want to check it out. Once you're into Pixlr X, I just click this Create New. I'm going to select 1920 by 1080 because that's what I stream at. And I can name this whatever I want up here in the Name section. I click Create. Now I'm going to draw a background box. So I select the Shape tool. I want it to be a square. I can change the color to anything I want, but I'm going to leave it white. Then I just drag it across the screen. Then I click these three little dots next to the layer. I'm going to rename it Background. And there we go. Now I'm going to click this little plus button and I'm going to add an empty layer. I'm going to call this layer Boxes. And once again in my Draw tool, I'm going to select the square. But this time I'm going to uncheck Fill. And I'm going to select Outline. I'm going to make this outline red by selecting the color. Now I'm just going to drag that box wherever I want it. I'm going to drag a second box for my guest wherever I want it. And if you mess up the size on the right hand side, you can see I can go back in History, remove that box and just create it until I get the size right. I'm going to move it around and try to make sure everything is centered properly. And now we're all set. I just need to cut out the holes in our background. So I'm going to go to our Cut tool. I'm going to select Shape, and we want a square. I'm going to select Remove. I'm going to make sure the background is selected, and I'm going to drag my cursor to the inside of these boxes. You can see that this removes all of the white from inside the boxes. Now I'm going to select the Text tool, and I'm going to add new text. I'm going to select the font. Then in the text box, I'm just going to type my name. I'm going to change the color of the text to red. Now I'm going to drag my text down below my box. Then under Layers, I'm going to click this little plus box. I'm going to select Text to create a text layer. Now I'm going to scroll up and change my text. My guest today is going to be Michael T. Panetta from Tech Examined. He's going to help me out with this tutorial here. I'm going to change that text color once again to red, and then I'm just going to drag that text wherever I want it to be. So now we have a basic overlay set up for our live guests. You can set up as many guests as you want in whatever layout you want. Once you're set, you click Save. You want to make sure you have PNG selected so it saves the alpha in there so that you have the background. Name it whatever you want and click Download. When you click Download, it's going to save your file to whatever the default is for your browser. So you should probably check this out if you don't know where it's saving your file. Now that we have our overlay all set up, let's go into OBS and add everything so we're ready to live stream. I'm going to use this tutorial scene I already have set up. I'm going to click the plus next to sources and I'm going to add image. I'm going to call this image guest overlay and click OK. Now I'm going to click browse and go to the location where I saved my overlay. Then I'm going to click choose. You can see that it's all set up right there. I can just click OK, and there is my overlay. Pretty awesome. Next, I'm going to add myself to the stream. To do this, I'm going to click the little plus underneath sources, and I'm going to go to video capture device. I'm going to name this capture device cam card. Then under devices, I'm going to select my cam link, and I'm going to go to high, which selects the highest resolution that my cam link is available to stream at, which is 1920 by 1080. That is actually the size of my stream. Next, I'm going to reorder these layers. I'm going to put the overlay over top of my camera. And now I want to resize my box so I'm all squared in there. You can see that this doesn't really work as well as we would hope. So I'm going to crop this image just a little bit. I'm going to crop the left 400 and the right 400. And I'm going to resize it again and just move it into that box. So now the stream has me in it. I need to add my audio. So I click that little plus in the bottom of sources. Then I'm going to select audio input capture. I'm going to name this cam audio and click OK. Then under device, I'm going to drop that down and select my cam link and click OK. Now you can see my cam link audio is listed at the bottom. I can adjust the settings as I see fit. For this example, I'm going to use Skype. You can use any video conferencing device, as you're going to see in a moment. Skype just happens to be free and it's pretty high quality video, so it's pretty easy to use. So connect with your guest via Skype and make sure that your connection is working and you can hear him and he can hear you. Chances are you're going to need a pair of headphones in order to do this, because you cannot play your guest's audio over your speakers. It will feed back into your microphone and you're going to have a big loop of audio. It's going to be horrible. So make sure you connect a set of headphones to your computer so you're ready to go. And then click the little plus in the bottom left hand corner, select window capture. I'm going to call this Skype and click OK. Now I'm going to click the drop down and I'm going to select the Skype window. Now there might be a couple of them, so you might have to play around and just make sure you get the right one. But once you do, you're all set. You just click OK. Now you're going to resize your Skype window. Move it up into the general area that you want your window to be, and then just move it below the overlay. Now you can see we have our guest video added. You can see there's this other floating Skype window, and that's always going to be on top when you're using Skype. It's not a bad thing to have. It just makes it easier for you to know that Skype is actually working. Now to add our guest audio, we have to take a little bit of a detour. The reason why is because I use a Mac, and unlike a PC where you can add multiple audio inputs, the Mac doesn't give you that option. So what we're going to do is a little bit of a workaround. We're going to add a plugin called the iShowU audio capture device. It's pretty simple. I'll leave the link in the description so you can download this little bugger. And you can see that this has different versions depending upon what Mac OS you're using, but you want to download it, and right here it actually walks you through exactly how to set it up, so I don't need to do it here. The link is in the description. You're going to need this particular plugin in order to get your OBS to work. Once you have this plugin installed, the next thing we're going to have to do is set it up in our audio sources. And I'll leave a link in the description to this webpage as well, which walks you through how to set this up. But essentially, what this setup does is it combines multiple audio inputs into one. So if you have multiple guests or something like that, they're all going to be through one input. Unfortunately, this is really the only way to do it. So this calls it set up an aggregate device. You can see when I set this up on mine, I called it multi-output device. But the link in the description to this webpage is going to walk you through exactly how to set up your aggregate device that's going to connect all of your audio into one. And you have to do this, unfortunately, on a Mac. On a PC, all you have to do is select your audio source, and Skype will be listed. So let's go back into OBS and finish up setting up our guest. The first thing I'm going to do is click the little speaker volume icon up at the top of my Mac And in the drop down, I'm going to select multiple output device. Now, you might have named this anything you want. If you follow the instructions, you might call this an aggregate audio device or something like that. But whatever you named it, you're just going to want to select that so the check mark is next to it. Next, I'm going to click the little plus below sources, and I'm going to add audio input capture. I'm going to name this Skype Audio and then click OK. Next, under device where it says default, I'm going to drop this down and I'm going to select this I Show You Audio Capture device and click OK. Now when Michael T talks, we can actually see his audio. We can adjust it as we see fit. Now all that's left to do is click Go Live. Now, especially if you're using Mac, the audio setup can be a little wonky, so I highly recommend that you just test everything before you ever decide to go live. And you can actually add a guest while you're live in studio mode by checking this video out right here if you want. There are a couple of things on a Mac that you need to know. The flicker that you see every once in a while is because we used a windowed source. If you want to avoid getting the flicker on your guest, the easiest way to do it is to have a second monitor. You put Skype on that second monitor, then instead of adding a window, you just add a display. When you do that, you're going to notice the entire display shows up. You can just crop it exactly like we did for my image, and then put it anywhere you want, and this will avoid any kind of glitching that you might see. One more word of caution as it pertains to the actual stream. When you're live streaming with a guest, you have their video coming into your computer, then your computer has to encode it and send it out again. This is going to require a pretty decent amount of computing power. You also want to make sure that your internet connection can really handle it. Now, I've done a lot of live streams with guests on pretty crappy internet connections, and it's my experience that if you adjust your bit rate, you can probably find one that will work for you. But just be aware, you should test it to be sure. Not just on a Mac, but on any computer you plan to stream from. If you're just getting started with OBS and you want to know more, you should check this video out right here. It tells you everything you need to know about getting started with OBS. And if you're always looking for tools, tips, and tricks that can help make you a better YouTuber, subscribe to the channel. My name is Michael Fire Jr. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Today, I'm going to show you how to stream multiple guests on your live stream using Zoom and OBS. And most importantly, I'm going to show you how to do it on Mac and PC because there are some differences in how you have to add the audio. So let's get to it. If you're always looking for tools, tips, and tricks that can help make you a better YouTuber, subscribe to the channel and click that bell so you don't miss a new video. One of the main things that people want to do when they're live streaming is add a guest, because you can do an interview or you can just interact and have a fun hangout with a bunch of other people. And there are a lot of different ways to do it, but I notice a lot of people like to use Zoom. Because Zoom has a really high quality of video, it makes it nice to use. But when you're streaming multiple guests, a lot of people don't know how to set it up. So today, I'm going to show you how to set up your Zoom live streams, and most importantly, how to add your audio. And we're going to take care of that first, because on Mac, you have to add a couple of things. So let's jump into what you have to do on your Mac in order to live stream with a Zoom guest. Now, to add our guest audio, we're going to have to take a little bit of a detour here. The reason why is because I use a Mac, and unlike a PC where you can add multiple audio inputs, a Mac doesn't give you that option. So what we're going to do is a little bit of a workaround. We're going to add a plugin called the I Show You Audio Capture device. It's pretty simple. I'll leave the link in the description so you can download this little bugger. And you can see that this has different versions depending upon what Mac OS you're using. But you want to download it, and right here it actually walks you through exactly how to set it up. So I don't need to do it here. The link is in the description. You're going to need this particular plugin in order to get your OBS to work. Once you have this plugin installed, the next thing we're going to have to do is set it up in our audio sources. And I'll leave a link in the description to this web page as well, which walks you through how to set this up. But essentially what this setup does is it combines multiple audio inputs into one. So if you have multiple guests or something like that, they're all going to be through one input. Unfortunately, this is really the only way to do it. So this calls it set up an aggregate device. You can see when I set this up on mine, I called it multi-output device. But the link in the description to this webpage is going to walk you through exactly how to set up your aggregate device that's going to connect all of your audio into one. And you have to do this, unfortunately, on a Mac. On a PC, all you have to do is select your audio source. I've had a couple of people come back to me having trouble setting up the aggregate device, so right here are the screenshots of how I have it set up. I've been able to share this directly with a couple of people on Twitter who were having problems, and then they were able to fix them. The next thing we want to do is add Zoom to our laptop if you don't already have it. It's pretty simple. I just do a search for Zoom in Google, then I go and I download it. The install is really straightforward even on a Mac because it is a signed application, so you just have to double click it and it installs. Really simple. It's going to ask you for permissions to add your camera and all that stuff. You've probably been through this before, so just go ahead and add those cameras. Now we're going to get to the most exciting part. We're going to build our scene, add our guests, and get ready to go live. Okay, I'm going to do something different than I normally do in these videos. I'm just going to add a background. I'm going to show you that you don't need to use an overlay to create a scene like this. So I downloaded a background off the internet. Now I'm just going to click the little plus sign. I'm going to click image, and I'm going to go and find that image. Then I'm going to click OK, and you can see it's this little background space image. You can also see that this image is 1920 by 1080, and that's for a good reason. I want to make sure my background image is the same size as my canvas because it just saves on the encoder time. Now that we have a background in there, I'm going to flip over to Zoom, and I'm going to click this little drop down where it says New Meeting, and I'm going to go down to the bottom, and I'm going to copy the invitation. Now I can take this invitation and I can paste it out to whoever I want. Now I want to join my own meeting, so I'm going to go to copy the ID, click join. I'm going to put my little ID in there and click join. And I'm going to click test speaker and microphone just to make sure that we get the correct microphone set up. And so I test my speakers and that's all good. And then I'm going to test my microphone to make sure it's working properly. And then once I see that it is, I'm going to click yes. Then I'm going to click join with computer audio. And then I'm going to click it again. Now I'm going to click the little video thing here. And this puts up my video. And I'm going to click this participants button and see who else is waiting. And I see Monica's waiting. And I'm going to go ahead and accept her request to join. And there she is. Awesome. I'm going to paste this invite to somebody else. And there we see Michael T. Panetta's joined. So now we've got 3 people. Let's go ahead and set up a 3-person scene. The first thing I'm going to do is add a window capture. And you can see I get the wrong window here. Zoom has a couple of them. I want to make sure that I select the correct window. Once you see it here, I'm going to resize it up. Then I'm going to turn it off for a second. And I just want to add my camera. And I already have one loaded. So I'm just going to go ahead and add that camera. Then I'm going to resize it down a little bit, and I'm going to use Alt and left click to crop my image. Once I do that, I'm going to make Zoom visible again, and I'm going to crop Michael T. Panetta. I'm going to use the same technique. I'm going to hold down the Alt key and slide over the edges until I have the exact kind of box that I want for Michael T. And once I have the box that I want, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just move it into place and I can resize just that box. And I'm going to go ahead and click the plus again, go to window capture. I'm going to select that Zoom meeting once again and click OK. This creates a duplicate. Now I'm going to do the same thing by holding the Alt to crop Monica's box. And you can see that looks all right. Move it around. We'll get it looking all pretty. And now I'm going to just add a little bit of text to this. And it's pretty simple. I click the plus, I select the text tool, and I put in the name of the person I'm adding. myself. And there you go. You have the makings of a pretty nice looking little scene. Now, window capture is definitely the way to go if you only have one monitor, but it definitely will cause problems on your stream. You're going to see occasional glitching with the other folks' images. And this is just something that happens especially on a Mac in a window share. So what we're going to do to avoid that is this time I'm going to just do a display capture. So I'm going to capture my second monitor. Now you're going to notice that everyone's image is a little bit darker, and that's because when I'm doing a screen record, it darkens all the other screens that I have connected to my computer. And since I put this on a different display, that display is darkened, so it shows darkened on here. But I'll show you in a moment exactly what it really looks like. You can see Jay was added to this call as well, so what I'm going to do is use the same technique. I'm going to Alt left click and drag to make the boxes the shape that I want. Then I can resize those boxes. Then I go in, I use display capture once again. I select the display capture I've already created, and then I just create a box for each person using the Alt left click and drag to crop them properly. And then once I crop them, I resize them to the shape that I want, and I can just move them around. Then I'm reorganizing everything and getting people squared up to where I want to be. And you can see, this is the makings of a pretty nice looking scene here. Next, I'm going to add some audio. So I go and I click the plus button. I go to create new, and we're going to call this one guests. I'm going to click OK. Then I'm going to drop down and select the iShowU audio capture device, which we created at the very beginning. Now I have to go up here into my sound settings, and I'm going to select the iShowU device, and there you see it is working. If I want to hear it through my headphones, then I go up and I select the little volume key again, and I'm going to select the multi-output or the aggregate device that we talked about creating earlier as well, and that way I can hear everyone in my headpiece. Then I just have to go and add audio for myself, and we're all set. And here's what this would look like on stream. You can see that everyone is just as bright as they're supposed to be. It's only because I'm doing a screen record that it darkens out when I'm showing this. But man, the image quality when you use Zoom is really fantastic. If I were to set up a scene like this, I'd probably put a chat box or something over on the right hand side that would stream along with it, or you could put a widget or advertisements or whatever you want. Now, a couple of words of advice. You want to make sure that you have all the guests who are going to be in your live broadcast in Zoom before you start cropping everybody up. Because if you don't, it will move the windows around and totally mess up the crop. So just be aware of that. You should also be aware that as a free user of Zoom, you only get about 45 minutes free at a time. Then you either have to stop and reconnect or try another day. I'm not exactly sure what their trial is, but it's not forever for free. So that's just something to be aware of. If you're looking for ways to grow your audience through live streaming, you should check this video out right here. And if you want more information on different ways that you can add guests to your live stream, you should check this playlist out right here. And if you're always looking for tools, tips, and tricks that can help make you a better YouTuber, subscribe to the channel. My name is Michael Fire Jr. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.
Adam Maripos Vox here, and I am in the middle of completely overhauling my entire streaming setup. I have not streamed in months up until last night at the time of recording, and we had a fantastic return to streaming. And I'm going to be doing a lot of different stream setups. You've already seen me build that RGB glowing streaming PC in the background. We've got a few more coming, and we've got a lot of streaming content in the works. With that, I'm doing a tutorial here sponsored by Nerd or Die on how I set up my insane streaming layout and overlays and all of that you all saw in my Twitch stream over at twitch.tv/EvosVox. And we're going to be getting to it thanks to Nerd or Die. So link to them that tells them I sent you will be in the description below. Be sure you check it out. I am very excited for this tutorial. Alright, since today's tutorial is of course sponsored by Nerd or Die, we will be picking out and utilizing some of their presets and stream packages that you can get starting at $0. They do have some free resources on the site and some tutorials of their own, but we're going to check out some of the paid options and see what you get and how to set them up. But first we need to set up OBS. Now I am using OBS to record this tutorial, of course, but I do have a separate instance launched, and we are just going to make a brand new profile for my Twitch setup here. Actually, I have a Twitch profile. I'm going to delete it. It was a test. I don't need it. You may notice from time to time when I'm setting this stuff up, I have a lot of stupid scene collections from when I'm testing stuff, but we're just gonna start from scratch. And then same thing, new profile, Twitch 2019. I like to keep them named the same to match them up and always know which ones I'm using. Go up in here to the settings. Now we are going to be doing mostly 1080p based streaming. So while my main desktop is 4K, I'm going to leave it at 1080p for now, and we are going to be streaming. I'm going to start my test streaming at 1600 by 900 and 59.94 frames per second, of course. Now, you can play around with different scaling and things like that, and actually I am going to leave the base resolution 1080p so I can record full res recordings. But there is a difference between putting your scaling here in the video settings and in the output tab. If you go under advanced, you can actually tell it to rescale the output. There is actually a difference in that, and that if you do it in the output settings, that actually puts that workload on the computer or on the encoder versus putting it on just your graphics card. So if you're running into performance issues, it might be worth just dropping it down in here and unchecking it in output settings. I should be fine, but it's worth noting. All right, so we're going to focus on streaming settings here. I will be using X264 in this instance, although I do have another machine that has an NVIDIA RTX card that I would be using NVENC for. But for now, we're going to be using that. We're going to put CBR. It is going to be 6K minus the default audio is 160, so 5840, I believe. Yeah, do keep in mind that max Twitch bitrate recommendation is actually video plus audio, and you can technically send 6K video, but you can run into some issues. That's fine. We're going to drop it down to medium. Actually, we're going to do fast for now, just to keep it safe. I'm going to leave the rest of these blank. Keyframe interval set to 2, because this is going to Twitch. Recording, we are going to do full resolution recordings. I'm going to set it to my dedicated recording drive. That's over here in F. Record. I'm going to make a new folder. Actually, I have a folder here called Twitch. That way I know these are specifically my Twitch settings. Now I am going to use MKV because if things crash or whatever, I can still use the file. I'm going to set it up to record at least 5 audio tracks. And we're going to use the NVENC encoder. Default resolution. I'm going to come over here to CQP, and that's going to be 14, which is kind of visually lossless-ish. And then under preset, high quality, profile, high, and just going to leave the rest on defaults at the moment. Under audio, I'm going to leave the default track for Twitch at 160 bitrate, so I'm going to call this Twitch down mix. But then for the others, these will be my recording tracks. So I'm going to set them the highest that it will let me, which is, of course, 320 kilobits per second. And these will be my other settings. So we're going to have mic, desktop, console, if I have a game console input, Discord, and so on. And then we are going to set up a replay buffer so I can save out specific clips a lot easier. We're going to set it to a 45-second duration. And hit apply, and it will do what it can to maintain a replay buffer of 45 seconds. You will, of course, if you're using a replay buffer, need to come in here and set a hotkey for saving the replay buffer. You don't need a hotkey for starting and stopping it, but for actually saving the replay buffer, which is right here. I already have a button on my Elgato Stream Deck, so I'm going to press it. Alt F8 is apparently it. I'm going to hit apply, and we're good to go. Despite what other tutorials may tell you, partial and 601 and NV12 are the best settings when you're live streaming to Twitch. You can kick it up to 709, kick it up to full. You can run into some issues on some web browsers playing back the stream with regards to color representation. So, we've got OBS configured to live stream to Twitch. Even though we don't have anything in it, we're going to get set into that. So, we want to make a couple default scenes here. So, this is scene 1. I'm going to add this and make it desktop.
Settings. Now I'm going to use MKV.
And I'm just going to add a display capture. We're going to add one. It's going to be webcam. Hello. I do not have my main light on. My head is hurting. I don't want it on, so it's going to be a little dark in here today. You can see the kitty playing behind me. Hello, kitty.
Which is kind of visually lossless-ish. And then other presets.
Now we're going to start building out our layout. We could set up some other scenes, but for now we're going to do this. So you can browse nerderdie.com. I do have an affiliate link that, well, it's not an affiliate. Well, I guess technically it is an affiliate link, but a link since they're sponsoring me to let them know that I sent you and all that good stuff. So be sure to use that.
The highest that it will let me, which is of course 320 kilobits per second, and these will be my other settings. So we're going to have mic, desktop, console if I have a game console input, Discord, and so on. And then we are going to set up a replay buffer so I can save out specific clips a lot easier. We're going to set it to a 45-second duration and hit apply, and it will do what it can to maintain a replay buffer of 45 seconds. You will, of course, if you're using a replay buffer, need to come in here and set a hotkey for saving the replay buffer. You don't need a hotkey for starting and stopping it, but for actually saving the replay buffer, which is right here. I already have a button on my Elgato Stream Deck, so I'm going to press it. Alt F8 is apparently it. I'm going to hit apply, and we're good to go. Despite what other tutorials may tell you, partial and 601 and NV12 are the best settings when you're live streaming to Twitch. You can kick it up to 709, kick it up to full. You can run into some issues on some web browsers playing back the stream with regards to color representation. So, we've got OBS configured to live stream to Twitch, even though we don't have anything in it. We're going to get set into that.
So much Yon Mute, motherfucker.
Default scenes here, so this is scene 1. I'm going to add this and make it desktop. Settings. Now I'm going to use MKV. I'm just going to add a display capture. We're going to add one. It's going to be webcam. Hello. I do not have my main light on. My head is hurting. I don't want it on, so it's going to be a little dark here today. You can see the
hello, hello.
behind me. Hello, kitty. 14, which is kind of visually lossless-ish. Now we're going to start building out our layout. We get to set up some other scenes, but for now we're going to do this. So you can browse nerderdie.com. I do have an affiliate link that, well, that's not an affiliate. Well, I guess technically it is an affiliate link, but a link since they're sponsoring me to let them know that I sent you and all that good stuff. So be sure to use it. The highest that it will let me, which is of course 320 kilobits per second, and these will be my other settings. So we're going to have mic, desktop, console if I have a game console input, Discord, and so on.
The slow process of sanity.
Specific clips a lot easier. We're going to set it to a 45-second duration and hit apply, and it will do what it can to maintain a replay buffer of 45 seconds. You will, of course, if you're using a replay buffer, need to come in here and set a hotkey for saving the replay buffer. You don't need a hotkey for starting and stopping it, but for actually saving the replay buffer, which is right here. I already have a button on my Elgato Stream Deck, so I'm going to press it. Alt F8 is apparently it. I'm going to hit apply, and we're good to go. Despite what other tutorials may tell you, partial and 601 and NV12 are the best settings when you're live streaming to Twitch. You can kick it up to 709, kick it up to full. You can run into some issues on some web browsers playing back the stream with regards to color representation. So, we've got OBS configured to live stream to Twitch, even though we don't have anything in it. We're gonna get set into that.
So much
We
young
like a couple
motherfucker.
default scenes here, so this is scene 1. I'm gonna add this make my settings. I'm gonna use in-game. I'm just gonna have the display capture. I can still use camera. It's gonna be webcam. I do not have my main light on. My eyes are dirty and I don't want to. It's gonna be a little dark.
Hello there.
We're gonna start building our layout. We've decided some other things, but for now we're gonna do this. So you can browse nerdguy.com. I do have an affiliate link. That's not affiliate. Well, I guess technically it is an affiliate link. Since they're sponsoring me, let them know that I sent you and all that good stuff. So be sure to use the highest that I will let me, which is of course 320 kilobits per second. And these will be my other settings. We're gonna have mic, desktop, console. If I have a game console on for it, input, Discord, and so on.
The slow process of sanity. Now there we fucking go. Final fucking Lee, man. God damn, that took forever. I'm not even finished technically, but this was a hell of a lot of progress, so that's good. Finally, man. God damn, that took forever. I'm not even finished technically, but this was a hell of a lot of progress, so that's good. Shit, man. Talk about lag. Symmetry, my fellow mortals. Symmetry. LOL. Whoever's watching, comment in the chat. Hmm. I see you watching. Anonymous person. Fellow mortal. And there you go. Attaboy. You don't need to watch. Hmm.
crispness in them. So you can say dismantling structures. And that kind of holds a lot of people off because you are, and this is the main thing, I don't think it's so much language, it's that people are afraid. We have gotten to this weird point. It's very interesting. Starting in the 1970s and continuing through the 80s, we have this massive psychosocial revolution in this country, unprecedented in the history of the human species. And that is that the typical person comes to think of it as a horrible thing to be called a racist, practically like being called a pedophile. That's progress. It doesn't mean that their minds are completely swept of all possible racist feeling, but that was new. And it's at the point where people even under 50 are beginning to forget how new that was. Forget if you're under 30, but that was new. But once you've got everybody in that place, now here comes something a few beats later where what it threatens you with is you being tarred as a racist in public. That wouldn't have been processed as such a threat in even 1980. A lot of people would have just said, basically, if you think I'm a racist, fuck you. And we think of that person when we look back and we think of them as callous, and they would have been. But now, ordinary people, the ordinary good person is so scared that they will do things that they don't mean. They will say things that they don't believe. And so one of them is that you don't say anything about what can be put under that umbrella of Black Lives Matter. And it's not necessarily that people don't, in some part of their mind, understand that a lot of this stuff doesn't make any sense, but they're afraid. They're afraid of being called a name. They would rather avoid being called a name than make socio-political sense. And part of why it gets up my nose, as Mrs. Slocum used to say in Are You Being Served, the British sitcom, part of what gets up my nose is that it's condescending. What any white person who is paying court to this sort of thing is doing is saying Black people don't have to make sense. It seems like Black minds don't matter. So I will say anything that I need to say to keep these people from embarrassing me in public and making me feel bad about myself. And if it doesn't make any sense, well, Black people kind of don't, do they? I'll bet some people in their bedrooms are saying that when Black people can't hear. And yet we're not supposed to talk about that either. So it's all very disturbing, but I don't think, and Sam, this is, we may differ on this, we may not. I don't think it's cynical. I think very few of these people are thinking to themselves, we are going to take power and we're going to do it by manipulating language and by playing with people's minds. I think these people are quite sincere, and that's what makes it harder. It's almost harder to have to hurt somebody's feelings when they genuinely think that they're giving you a present. But unfortunately, the people in this case who think they're giving us a present are, some of them are very naive. I think more of them are, if they're white, they're hell-bent on feeling good about themselves as not racist, and they'll let that trump sense. If you're a Black person who subscribes to this sort of thing, you have been tricked by this sort of person and a lot that was going on before into thinking that what makes you significant and what makes you special is your victim status rather than you as yourself. That's understandable given Black people's history, that you might need to reach a little further than some people to find a sense of well-being and significance and security. It's completely understandable. But that means in this case that a lot of people think that the most interesting thing about themselves is what they suffer in terms of what people who aren't them are or maybe aren't thinking. That's not a healthy self-identity. So all of this is just a complete mess, but no one is malevolent in these cases. We're not dealing with cynics. We're dealing with people who are tragically misled.
That's really interesting. I think on the cynicism point, maybe I'm putting the line between good and bad faith at a slightly different point. I guess, so let's just, I want to plunge into a conversation about racism here and what it means as a term, what it should mean, and just how the kind of the mission creep of the concept is causing a lot of suffering. To step back for a second, the reason why I want to talk about this is I'm really worried about this trend we're speaking about the capture of our institutions and our language by this, I would say, cultic behavior. I mean, it's, I've referred to it as a cult of wokeness. You're talking about the new religion of anti-racism. There's a kind of moral extortion going on, and a Stockholm syndrome, and I mean all of these analogies seem apt, and I'm worried about it for two reasons. One, I'm worried in the near term that it will be the thing that gets Trump reelected. And I put myself in second position to, I think, no one in my desire to see Trump's political career ended in November.
I think it'd be nice,
but
yes.
I really do think that, this will be why we get 4 more years of the Orange Goblin in the White House. But beyond that, and a much longer term concern is that I think it is doing and will do damage to race relations in this country. And it'll do precisely the damage that I think it's pretending to expose in many cases. And the analogy that came to mind recently, I was on someone else's podcast and I just wound up blurting this out, but I think I stand by it. I mean, what I feel like it is happening over the course of many months is analogous to what happened, on a single ghastly afternoon when the OJ verdict was delivered, right? When you saw, those of us who are, old enough remember this, as I assume you do. I mean, we saw on, split screen on, every television in the country, we saw these opposing reactions to a single, moment. And to see, and so when white America, obviously there were exceptions in both camps, no doubt, but the general experience was of white America seeing Black America erupt in jubilation over this verdict.
Yeah.
And this is why I use the term cynical here, because it's not that you can't explain that reaction in terms of, all the terrible inequality and grievance that has preceded it, right? I mean, we have the history of white and Black America to explain that moment. But within the frame of that trial and that verdict and that moment, there was something cynical about it because I think it was widely understood, if not universally understood, that he was obviously guilty, right? And but everyone knew it, and everyone knew that everyone else knew it. And so there was no sense that all of these Black faces that were, tearful in joy over the outcome here thought that this man hadn't nearly decapitated his wife and a stranger, right? They were playing a very different game that had nothing to do with truth or justice in this case, or putting an actual murderer behind bars or setting an innocent man free. And so that's where maybe cynicism isn't the right rubric here, but it's a lack of purchase on what is true that I think is so awful here. And it's, again, the analogy has to change a little bit to cover the phenomenon we're talking about now, but it's the dishonesty and bad faith, the notion that you need to break a lot of eggs to make this equity omelet. And so, yeah, there's a lot of people who we know really aren't racist who are going to go down for this because, it's just, this is the way we have to play our political game. That's the kind of thing that is so toxic. And so anyway, I put that to you as an analogy, but I mean, I feel like the spirit of that dissociation from honest conversation about facts. I mean, so I guess the frame here would be, there's something like a default position now in polite society, at the New York Times, in universities, in corporations, that every significant disparity we're seeing between white and Black America, whether it's violent crime or educational outcomes or employment, how many Fortune 500 CEOs are of whatever skin color, the only way to explain those disparities is either white racism or institutional racism or systemic racism. And nothing else need be thought about. And to think about anything else is to essentially volunteer to be cast as yet another racist who doesn't get it, or yet another troglodyte, another Archie Bunker character who doesn't get it. And there's a commensurate just attempt to deprogram our whole society along those lines. And then, we have this cast of characters like Ibram X. Kendi and Robin DiAngelo spreading really the doctrine of a new religion to, to people who are avid to pay for it. That's where I'm placing the cynicism in this movement.
Yeah, I see what you mean. And you touch on very important points. One of them is something that you see that can be really confounding, which is that the central members of this elect group are willing to hold on to this ideology, even if it means losing elections. And that's one of many things that shows that this isn't about politics. This isn't about dismantling structures. This is mainly, it's a religious creed. We are like Romans watching the birth of Christianity. I genuinely think, within my lifetime, I have watched a really influential new religion in formation. Isn't it in its way interesting? And that's why, so for example, Mark Lilla's book from a few years ago, where he said that we need to tamp down identity politics with the purpose of getting this moron out of office, that a certain kind of person basically circled the wagons and called him all kinds of names, including white supremacist, because he wasn't with the gospel. And it's the same way now, where what is most important is to talk about institutional racism and call the requisite people white supremacists, and to really, really annoy as many people as possible, regardless of whether it could mean that we have another 4 years of that narcissistic, insouciant simpleton as the person running this country. They really have a different sense of ranking than anybody would, except if it was a religion. And what you're talking about otherwise comes down to what really is the keystone problem of the whole way that we're being urged to see the race problem. And that is this idea that any problem that black people have, any kind of lag, is due to racism. And it's partly, you talk about language, partly because of the way the use of the term racism has drifted. I don't think anybody was pulling the term along in order to throw up some kind of smokescreen, but racism starts as Archie Bunker and his personal bigotry. And then starting in the 1960s, it comes to refer not to active racism, but to results of racist behavior, or even just racism, meaning that black people are behind in some way, such that you can say that the society is racist in that disparity by analogy with what racism originally was. And so it ends up being a very muddy term. Language tends to be muddy, but our new idea is indeed what you're mentioning that, say, Ibram Kendi or Robin DiAngelo say, which is that if black people lag behind, then it's racist. And with Kendi in particular, you can feel him holding back the indignation, because he really feels that if this isn't perfectly obvious, then I don't know what isn't. And the fact that I have to write a book saying this or 2 books saying this is an indication of the racism in question. Although, of course, now we're getting into this extremely protean sense of what racism is. But the problem with all of this is that the racism in cases like this, whatever we want the term to mean, gets to be so abstract, so difficult to perceive, that if it is racism, we're talking about such a Rube Goldberg game of mousetrap that there's no way that you could meaningfully convince any dominant segment of any public of normal people that this made sense. And so, for example, every summer, the number of teenage and 20-something black boys in distressed communities who are killing each other goes way up. And we haven't wanted to talk about it, but that's been including in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. We've been talking about George Floyd, and lately various other men who have suffered really grisly fates at the hands of the cops. And in the meantime, black men have been killing each other with abandon in city after city across the United States, as happens every summer. Now, that is a tragedy. It has nothing to do with any kind of inherent depravity of the boys and men in question. But tell me how it's about racism. And if you're going to call it being about racism, if you're going to talk about not having fathers, if you're going to talk about the fact that the war on drugs was created partly with black criminals in mind 50 years ago, all of that is so indirect at this point that to just hold your hands out and say that the reason they're doing that is racism, in the way that, for example, Kendi would, it's just a vast oversimplification. Once again, white people are being told that it's okay to pretend that when race issues come up, you let your IQ go down about 50 points because apparently black people's IQs are just stuck there. And so it won't work. I can understand a lot of people's good intentions here. To be honest, I don't think that Kendi or DiAngelo quite understand the matter beyond this. I think, to put it most politely, I think neither one of them quite understand that these issues would be worth a kind of sustained sort of engagement. They don't realize how complex these things are, partly because, although they wouldn't use the word, they're under the influence of a religion. How complicated is the Bible supposed to be beyond the world of theologians? But They're not thinking about it all that hard. But this is the proposition that will never work. Irish people, Jewish people, there's certain people listening to me now who are just, sitting at the edge of their seats waiting to say, but they were white. Hold on, folks. I've heard it before. Think about it. Have I not heard that before? Let me make the point. There were Irish people, there were Jewish people, there were Italian people, and they used to practically be thought of as black, and well, they became white, and they did it without there being any grand psychosocial revolution in society. Now, the idea has always been, well, it wasn't fair to expect black people to do that. And you know what? Maybe it wasn't, and that's why we had a civil rights revolution that gave us a real boost. And nobody can deny that we did get a real boost in the 60s and early 70s. There are all sorts of things in place that allow that. So we get that real boost, and there's a further psychosocial revolution in terms of how the country thinks about racism. But the idea is somehow that it's only going to go that far because since we're brown, the prejudice against us is stronger, and therefore, this is what white people who are on the fence, and I think white people even who wouldn't call themselves on the fence, but deep down when they're having a drink, think about, is that black people are always waiting for the rules to be different for us. There's this idea that everybody else just had to claw their way, and that with black people, even though there was a civil rights revolution, still not enough. In our case, the rules have to be different. Now we have people with lots of letters after their names who can put that sort of thing in very elegant language. I don't think they're doing it on purpose, but the intersectionality is one way of doing it. People like Ibram Kendi's idea that we recast what we think of as intelligence and make it things like, quote unquote, desire to know. That's from one of his books. The whole notion that we recast what we think of as talent, the idea that we're going to reform the subject of STEM and change how we think of physics, etc., that mathematics is racist, all of this stuff. What all of this translates into is for black people, the rules have to be different. And, people are sick of it. And it's at the point where it's understandable that they will be. This whole new ideology is based on an idea that we're going to teach a significant number of people in the United States to have so creative, so transformative a view of how human affairs could go in this great nation that change could actually happen. And it's not gonna. Part of the reason that I find all of this so disturbing is because they're poor black people who need real help. And people who consider themselves to be speaking for them are sitting around in rooms, putting their hands up in the air and saying that they understand their white privilege and teaching black people to think that their main role in society is to be the people who they should be grateful that white people consider themselves privileged over. And now we have people who are trying to teach this to our children, sometimes with actual books. And in the meantime, Donald Trump gets reelected, and somehow all of this is progressivism? I seriously doubt it. But I say again, these people don't know what they're doing. They're not mean. They think that they're giving us the good news. They're like Mormons. But we just have to realize that those smiles on their faces are deceptive, and we can't let them win.
Well, it really is a complex picture, but there are so many ways to notice that its complexity has to exceed at every point the simple diagnosis that it's white racism or systemic racism that is not yet fully rectified because white people simply don't care enough about it, that explains all of these problems. Because just two things that occurred to me as I was listening to you. When you think about the variable of race, and you notice that there are some communities like African immigrants, Nigerian immigrants who succeed disproportionately, per capita in our society, right? They're among the most successful people in our society. White racism should be cutting against them in the same way, right? So if it were that pernicious, if we just had racists in all these companies in Silicon Valley who just don't want black people in the office, it would show up there too. And this is a point that Coleman Hughes has made in various contexts.
I was just thinking of him. Yeah.
And then there's also the fact that if you take the problem of violence that you referenced in a city like Chicago, that you really can set your watch by, and you can know the color of people's skin in advance. This is what's so depressing, right? If you tell me that 30 people were shot over the weekend in Chicago, I could make money all day betting that they were non-white.
Sadly, right? Yes. Yeah.
So to obfuscate that fact is as virtually everyone left of center is inclined to do at this moment, is really kind of sanity straining and totally unproductive. But when you ask what a non-racist who would want nothing more than to solve that problem could do to solve it, right? If we could just, with all of our goodwill of non-racism or anti-racism, come in there and fix the problem, what would that solution look like? It's not, whatever the solution is, it's not a matter of just making sure that everyone within 1,000 miles of Chicago is no longer racist, right? I mean, there we have a cultural problem there that is being expressed that needs some remedy, and people need to be given somehow a totally different aspiration that has something to do with getting educated and something to do with integrating in polite society. It's just hard to see how even someone like Kendi can think that that's the full story.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting thing, and I'm glad you brought up Nigerians, because there's a little bit more to the story that I was mentioning, which was that it used to be said that, well, white people are only going to let black people get so far. Then after about 1990, we started having a high level of African immigrants to this country, not to mention Caribbean ones who'd been coming before. And it's become painfully clear that these are people who are often subject to exactly the same kinds of racism. It's not that racism doesn't exist, but they thrive. They make the best of the least. Now, people who speak for black people, black ones and fellow travelers, have a standing response to that, which is that those people have what's called immigrant pluck, and it's not fair to expect native-born black people to have it. And, one answer to that question is why? What group in the history of the human species has ever had a motto of, yes, we can't? That's what that is. The idea is that you're supposed to be proud of saying, no, we can't be expected to have that kind of pluck. What that is self-hating. And it's interesting because there's a grand old tradition of calling someone like me self-hating. Apparently, I lack confidence. Apparently, I wish I were white. Well, you know what? I'm afraid not. And the truth is that from behind my eyes, I see people who are willing to settle for this weak vision of what black people are supposed to be as the ones who don't like themselves inside, which is part of why I almost never get really angry at them. I think to myself, if you don't like yourself, then of course you're going to settle for this. And of course you're going to get mad if somebody like me who does comes along and says that you need to buck up. I understand that anger. But yeah, the other problem is that we're not allowed to talk about that all human groups have negative cultural traits, and that being a descendant of African slaves at the end of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st doesn't somehow make that untrue. And so instead of talking about the cultural problem, there's this assumption that you're saying that there's something biologically depraved about black people, and you must have your wrist smacked about that. But yes, the question becomes, what racism would you withdraw to solve a problem? And so, for example, a lot of why black guys are killing each other in cities is based on things that trace back, often maybe 2 or 3 steps, but trace back to the war on drugs. So one solution might be to fight tooth and nail against that ridiculous war on drugs, because its effect would be, when you withdrew that things in the inner city would be quite different, because there would be no drug turf to fight over. There would be no tempting black market if you went to a lousy school and had a lousy life to use to keep the wolf from the door. If there were no way of making half a living selling drugs. And notice, folks, I said half a living. I know the factoid that none of them get rich except the occasional person, but still, it keeps the wolf from the door. If that weren't possible, then the same men would go find legal work and claw their way up from the bottom. And it's not fair that they have to, but that would be better than getting killed or going to prison for a very long time and leaving children to recapitulate their lives because their dads weren't there. Let's face it, it would be better. But you don't talk about that too much. Now, many of the people will say, well, yes, we need to talk about that too. But why is it that their favorite topic is just to get rid of quote unquote racism, with the idea that, protesters about what happened to George Floyd actually putting their bodies on the ground, white protesters, and bowing down to black people standing up there above them, is somehow more important, or is even a necessary preliminary? All of this energy that people are putting into, for example, putting out statements that their organization is going to fight white supremacy. And the organization is like a school of nursing. The organization is a school of music theory. It's a math department. All of these profoundly racist places. Why is any of that necessary when really all that energy could go into getting rid of a war on drugs that would solve probably about 65% of the problems that most ail us? You don't talk about it because we're talking about a religion. It's not because the people are dumb. It's not because they're crazy. It's not because they're mean. And not to, push this too hard, I don't think it's that they're cynics. It's that they are pious. They have taken on a way of thinking that means that you sequester a part of your brain for thoughts and responses that are not based on logic. And we can't say that that's crazy because most of the world's human beings are religious.
No, I totally follow you there. That is, I tend to think of it as a cult, but the difference between a cult and a religion is just numbers of subscribers. So it's, as it grows, it certainly could have the shape of a new religion. Let's talk about how to move forward. Just what would a sane path through the wilderness look like, and how we should think about identity and just what the goal is. In my mind, the goal is something like a colorblind society. So that to truly overcome racism would not be to arrive in some future where more and more of us are passionate anti-racists. It would be to arrive in a future where we could never dream, really, that skin color could have moral or political significance, right? Just as is the case with hair color today. No one is trying to figure out how many, blondes or brunettes or redheads are in various positions in society. And for good reason. Nobody cares. And if we perversely started caring about that, right, and started advertising our grievances with respect to hair color, would have taken a significant step away from basic human sanity. And so we have to recover sanity somehow with this variable of race. Just to give a little context here, anyone who's been listening to my podcast for a while knows that, and who knows anything about my views about the nature of the mind and the nature of the self, knows that I don't think a person should even, at the end of the day, identify with the face that he or she sees in the mirror each day. That is not the proper locus of one's self-concept. But, how much less should one identify with a group of people, most of whom will be strangers forever, who just happen to superficially resemble the face you see in the mirror each day. It just seems completely nuts to think of oneself in those terms in any kind of ongoing way. And the idea that I would spend any part of today thinking about my whiteness or feeling solidarity with other white people because we share some skin tone, in the midst of my life, that would be synonymous with me suffering some kind of brain damage. It would be a kind of illness of the mind. And yet what is being advertised to us from all quarters is that group identity, and again, this, within the wokeness, this extends beyond race. This covers sexuality and gender and other variables, but there's a primacy of group identity that is, apparently there's no vision any longer of getting beyond, right? It's just, but as much as I want to get beyond it, that's not to say that I believe I am colorblind now, right? Because that is actually, it strikes me as impossible as long as one is aware of statistics. So for instance, what I just said about being able to predict who is committing, all of these crimes in Chicago, right? The fact that I know these background facts about the identities of people, who are committing robberies and other violent crimes gives me a certain expectation. I'm very surprised to hear it when it turns out to be a Hasidic Jew, and not at all surprised when I hear it's yet another black man who's guilty of whatever the crime is. And so it's just that sort of background expectation which violates any principle of color blindness now. And I guess the flip side of it for me, recently I remember I was watching one of these SpaceX launches, and when they went to the kind of the press conference side of things, one of the people on the panel was a black woman who was one of the rocket scientists. She was an engineer of some kind. So, the reality of that situation for me is, I'm watching that, and it made me inordinately happy to see a black woman rocket scientist. And so, and the only way to understand that, psychological change in me is things are going on. One is I have some, though I never thought about it up until that moment, I had some background, statistical belief that it was fairly uncommon for a black person, much less a black woman, to be a rocket scientist.
Mm-hmm.
But in addition to that, there's a deeply positive, albeit not at all colorblind emotion, which is I'm overjoyed to see a black woman rocket scientist. I mean, like that, I want there to be more black women in those roles. And, conversely, I want there to be fewer black men in the role of yet another booked suspect for a robbery or a homicide in a major American city. So just the mere awareness of the statistics kind of overrides any aspiration for being truly colorblind at moments like these. But that failure of colorblindness cannot be the same thing as racism, right? Because what I want is all of these good outcomes and, more good outcomes and fewer bad outcomes for black people in either case. And beyond all of that, what I want more than anything is to get to a society where I wouldn't even be tempted to notice the color of a person's skin, whether they're a rocket scientist or a criminal, right? Because it would make no sense to notice it because I didn't notice their hair color either, right? It's just, it's like, and so the question is, how do we get there? So, but it does strike me that there's this transitional period where color blindness isn't quite the prescription. And I guess the question of, affirmative action, lands right in here. It's like, what is the right policy to be implementing, given that, I think the goal really is to get beyond any kind of politics of identity in the end.
Yeah, that's what we were supposed to want, and that's become unfashionable. And there are reasons for it. It's interesting. If you could go into a graduate seminar in a humanities department on just about any subject, and you could, hook up wires to every student after they had, signed a certain protocol, making sure that everything was okay, knowing that nothing unpleasant was going to happen to them. Put some wires on everybody, EKG or something like that, and then just get up in front of the class and say identity. And you could watch people's blood pressure go up a little bit, and you could probably measure, if you did a quick blood test, endorphins going through their veins. There's this notion that what it really has to be about is identity. And what I mean by that is that these days we're taught that the enlightened black person centers their sense of self on their relationship to what white people are doing or not doing. And so what exactly is your identity? And your identity has to be caught up in this idea of not being white and also being in eternal complaint about what white people are doing or not doing. That is considered the advanced thing. That is higher reasoning. That is the equivalent in this religion to having faith in Jesus. And so if that's what you're doing, then the idea that we're going to get past race is inconvenient, because for that kind of person, and unfortunately that kind of person is common, for that kind of person, if you're not thinking of yourself as colored, so to speak, you don't have anywhere to grab onto. To even think of the idea of a colorblind America is to imagine an America in which you cannot imagine just where you would fit in. What we're dealing with is ultimately what happens to Homo sapiens when groups get larger than about 150 people, where nobody has to wonder what they are. With white elect, in this case, a lot of it is that you want to have a sense of purpose. And if it can't be that you're just somebody's brother and somebody's son, and you marry somebody and all of you go out and you hunt whales or something like that, you don't have any existential crisis. Once you're in a large modern society, you want to have a sense of what you are good for. What's your purpose? It can be hard to find that. It is not natural to wish to be an individual. And yet that is what modernity forces upon us. So one thing that you can be is this crusader where you're battling racism. But that means, especially with the way it's being put these days, that you must think of yourself as this evil white person who's always going to be racist no matter how many good things you do for black people, and you feel good about being able to say that about yourself. If you couldn't say it, then who exactly are you? And it's wrong to suppose that any of these people on either side, the white side or the black side, and of course that's a vast oversimplification, but it's not that anybody's trying to make money. It's not that anybody's trying to have power. If anything, it's part of the self-definition of the elect to think of themselves as not having power. It's what makes you feel like a person. And so what we have is a situation where here is the black female rocket scientist, and I'm sure that the typical elect person applauds that in a kind of perfunctory way. But what they want is for it to be made easier for black people to become rocket scientists by getting rid of all of the really tough math. And I'm not exaggerating. You can actually hear people saying these sorts of things, as I have walking next to them. You can read people saying things like this. There are tenured and hot-shot black professors who stand up in front of august bodies of people saying that it's racist to expect black scholars to be mathematically competent. And I'm not exaggerating. And so the idea is that if we're going to have a colorblind society, it's going to have to be one where how we do rocket science is changed, or that you can become a rocket scientist without learning a lot of the things that until now it's been thought of as absolutely necessary and even defining for a rocket scientist to know. And that's really dangerous stuff. Again, partly because it's horrifically condescending. If the idea were that you could be a rocket scientist by not doing the things that rocket scientists are supposed to do, everybody would know the ones that had not done the things that you're supposed to do. And everybody would be reinforced in thinking there was something wrong with black people, which the elect wouldn't mind. It's not that they're going for it, but they wouldn't mind because that would give them further fuel for talking about how indelibly racist society is. But yes, ultimately, we want to get past these distinctions. And yet my friend Thomas Chatterton Williams, whenever he tries to talk about how we need to start moving back towards the colorblindness that we see people in black and white newsreels singing of, well, he gets roasted as some kind of Uncle Tom, or he's a white supremacist. And of course, Sam, we have to talk about the fact that for a lot of people, the instant answer here is the cops. So for many people, the idea is that, for example, my identity must be focused on how I am not white because of what happened to George Floyd. Now, the problem there is that with OJ, I had a whole kind of Bildungsroman about that. I was disgusted watching those black students on TV cheering when it was painfully obvious what OJ Simpson had done. It took me a while to fully get that, yes, everybody knew what he did. It was painfully obvious, and I couldn't stand listening to people pretend not to know at the time because I like to have all the ducks in a row. But it was seen as a vigilante justice against a genuine terrorism that the LA cops had exerted against particularly black people in Los Angeles. And there was a similar feeling across the United States for reasons which statistically made sense then. And even if they didn't make sense exactly in 1997, people's sense of how the world works for them is not going to change instantly because of gradual sea changes over time. So nowadays, I see that the O.J. Simpson performance art had a certain understandability. It disappointed me a lot. In my first book about race, Losing the Race, I'm still white hot about people's willful refusal to understand the real facts on that case. Now I kind of get it, but goodness, it's been a while. OJ was that 1994? So here we are 26 years later. There are people who weren't born then who have 2 or 3 kids and real jobs. It was a very long time ago. And at this point, we're in one of the most challenging situations that I have ever known in terms of how we move forward, which is that if you look at the statistics, it is quite clear that the idea that cops, even subconsciously, kill black people out of racist animus or even subtle racist bias is simply insupportable. It doesn't work. And I was somebody who thought that that was true until about 4 years ago. And I was in a conversation with my sparring partner, Brown University economist and black man, Glenn Lowry, where he and I were arguing about this. And I said, Glenn, you'd have to prove to me that this sort of thing happens to white people. And not only does it happen to white people, but there are further arguments that make it clear that even if black men are killed disproportionately to their numbers, then unfortunate facts about who commits the most crimes, including homicides, not to mention just factoring poverty and how that affects interactions with cops, whether you're white, Latino, or black, makes it clear that the simple idea that's so intuitive, that George Floyd died because of the color of his skin, simply doesn't go through. And yet, Sam, what does worry me is that we are at a point where, because of the religion and its imperatives, you can't get that across to a critical mass of people. I have watched people much smarter than me presented with the very simple facts who simply can't hear them. And these are people who are usually rather even-tempered people who get upset. This really presses a button. And so, unfortunately, a lot of the people who identify as X, Y, or Z and seem to be going directly against what Martin Luther King was calling for would say that they're doing it because the cops killed George Floyd because he was black, and that kind of thing keeps happening. And as long as that's what they know, and as long as they won't listen to what the truth is about black men and the cops, which is that the cops are a serious problem in this country, but that when it comes to who they kill, the data simply doesn't support that black men are being killed because cops are racist against them. We can't really get anywhere. That's the hardest thing about this, the cops.
Interesting. Yeah. So as most people listening will recall, I did a podcast in the immediate aftermath of the George Floyd killing. I believe it was titled, "Can We Pull Back from the Brink?" which was a solo podcast. As I said at the time, I consciously resisted the impulse to bring on someone like yourself to sort of to midwife that conversation, because I just felt like the idea that I couldn't say what I thought needed to be said on my own as a white guy was pernicious and worth not capitulating to. So I did it solo and got a lot of support and also a lot of criticism. And people are, can't shake the feeling that a white person shouldn't be saying these things, very much along the lines of what you just said. I know you read the transcript of that podcast. I'm wondering, is there anything you think I got wrong, or is there any place, is there any daylight between us on this issue?
Sam, the honest truth is what you said on that podcast was all spun gold as far as I'm concerned. In terms of bravery, I was struck by your mentioning something that even I have hesitated to ever say anything about because of the nature of the situation, which is that really, if the cops, grab you and they want you to do something, you need to let them do it. The idea that you're being some kind of hero to resist, that you're supposed to think about the cosmic sociopolitics and kind of flip the bird at the cops or do worse, and that ends up creating a lot of these problems. Frankly, as people say, there is some of that. And I do think that ideally we would say one way that some of these things wouldn't happen is don't resist the police. Basically just do what they say. And as you said, put in your objections later after the heat of the moment has passed. If you feel that you've been stopped unfairly, if you feel that something has gone wrong, you can lodge the complaint. These days, there are more channels for getting your complaint out than there used to be. Social media means that you can basically have your say and possibly have it picked up much more easily than you could have in, say, 1974. But not then. None of the walking away, none of the yelling and screaming, none of the spitting, etc. And I feel like, I'm black and I can't say that because I feel like a lot of people feel that these people are having their say in a society that is dedicatedly set against the well-being of black people and black men in particular. And I just feel like many people simply couldn't hear that. There's a part of them that feels like this resistance of arrest in cases like this is a kind of new form of civil rights. And I sense that I could cut through that even less likely than I could make people understand that a George Floyd who was white, such as Tony Timpa 4 years before him, very similar situation, could have been killed under the same indefensible conditions. So it's a tough one. But no, what you said, I stand behind you. You were correct. And I thought to myself, it's kind of sad that you're not allowed to make this kind of logical sense when talking about these issues, because so much of it has been encrusted in what's thought of as higher reasoning, but is really a kind of performance art that serves more to make people feel secure in themselves within the structure of elect religion than to prevent bad things from happening to people. And so, for example, George Floyd, take away the war on drugs, and the cops would have much less reason to patrol disadvantaged black communities And many negative interactions, that's not what happened to be happening with George Floyd, but many negative interactions wouldn't happen simply by virtue of that. There's an educational crisis with kids that disproportionately affects disadvantaged Black kids, which has to do with how reading is taught. And to be very quick about it, reading should be taught by teaching kids how to sound out words. You'd think that was the most natural thing in the world, but there are other reading philosophies where you teach kids to recognize words as whole pieces because English spelling is weird, and you let them do that instead of, frankly, learning how to read. You and I probably learned by reading chunks, and that's because we are middle-class, readaholic kinds of people. But for kids who come from not book-lined homes, from kids who come from places where most communication is oral rather than on the page, you need to be taught the good old-fashioned way. It's surprising how that does not happen for a great many Black kids who really need it. And once you're just an okay reader, you're never going to be all that great in school, and you can't make the most of, say, a moderate, although not great school because you weren't taught how to read right. I have seen this happen. And finally, there needs to be free, easy access to long-term acting contraceptives that are reversible, but for 5 years, make it so that you can do family planning without having to work too hard. Way too many births of children are accidental. And if a lower income mom does not want to have kids until she's gotten on her feet, a way to avoid the kinds of accidents that happen to almost anybody in the course of life is to have these contraceptives be available to as many women as possible. And this would, of course, cover Black as well as Latino and white women. Women of that demographic in all colors have been shown in studies to like these. No talk about eugenics is appropriate here. It's just about being able to plan your family without thinking too hard and without so many births being accidents, especially if you're somebody who would prefer not to interrupt the growth of a child once it's started. Yes, I'm talking about abortion. If you don't want to have an abortion, great, but the LARCs, as they're called, make it so that you don't end up having to deal with those choices. If you did those three things, just those three, it would solve so many problems for Black people who need help. And all three of those things would go a good 80% of the way towards solving the problems we're talking about, regardless of how Derek Chauvin, or however you pronounce his name, feels about Black people in his heart of hearts. However privileged white people are or aren't, it would really put Black America back on its feet. But we're not supposed to think about anything so proactive because those aren't religious thoughts. We're supposed to think about things that are more emotional, things that are more interpersonal, things that make you feel like you've got the Lord in you. And that's where you get books like White Fragility. That's where you get books like How to Be an Anti-Racist. And oh my goodness gracious, that's where you get How to Raise an Anti-Racist Baby, which means that my children, 5 and 8, are going to have teachers. This is what scares me to my socks. My kids are going to run into this, and I'm trying to think of what I'm going to do about it. They're going to be these teachers with shining eyes, not cynics, shining eyes, teaching my biracial daughters that they need to primarily think of themselves as Black girls who are going to suffer racism at the hands of their white classmates. And I say, no, 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 no. But I'm afraid that we're getting to the point where there's no school that I could put them in where I could keep them from that. And I don't have time to homeschool. That's what's worrying me. But we need a real race sociopolitics that's about getting out on the ground and doing real things. And instead, we are engaging in a kind of charismatic navel gazing. And I think that we really need to get past it.
I'm in precisely that same position with respect to the education of my daughters, and it's amazing to witness. I think you just have to, at the appropriate moment, have the conversation with them to inoculate them against the brainwashing that's coming or that has already started. But it's a fascinating thing to try to navigate. I want to linger on this issue of the police videos because they have such an outsized effect on everything that's happening here. I mean, there's comparatively very few of them that have been widely seen. We really are talking about something like a dozen or 24 videos that have defined this moment culturally. Now, no doubt there are thousands upon thousands of them available. I've watched, many more than dozens. The thing I just want to reiterate about these videos is that they're very hard to understand, much less understand dispassionately, right? I mean, these are functioning, as you say, they have a religious significance. I mean, these are, held up as icons in, Orthodox Christianity. I mean, this is the moral core of the religion, the injustice that is patently obvious here within the frame of this phone. And yet they're functioning, to my eye, much more like a kind of pornography of grievance and distrust of institutions. And again, they're just reliably misunderstood by even very well-intentioned people who are not implicated at all in the video. It's just, my mother can't understand these videos. She reflexively sees everything that Ibram Kendi would want her to see in, naively coming to one of these videos. So, I mean, the thing to point out is that for every video you've seen, whether it's the George Floyd video or, Eric Garner or any of these other ones, I mean, one, there are differences among them that are incredibly important, right? I mean, that just for anyone who understands, violence and what cops can do and should do to protect themselves and the public once things start running off the rails. All of these videos are highly non-analogous with one another, and yet that is virtually never acknowledged. And, the cases where we don't have video, but where we know something about what happened, like the Michael Brown case, just totally unlike these other cases. The dissimilarities need to be noticed. But then there are, for every video you want to fasten on as emblematic of the problem of racism and police violence, you just have to know that there are other videos where all the relevant variables are reversed, where the skin color of all participants, cops and victims, are reversed, right? You just swap that all out, and you can find that video. And one thing that largely goes unacknowledged is there are videos where the thing that the cops are most worried about, suddenly getting shot in the face by the person who, until a moment before, showed no sign of being armed, those videos are there to be seen too, right? So the thing that explains how spun up the cops often are in these circumstances where they're shouting commands and going increasingly berserk in the presence of a non-compliant person. One, it so often speaks to their lack of training. They simply don't have all the tools they need to non-violently control somebody. We're speaking now on the day after a video that's, especially disturbing has circulated, which makes many of these points for me. And there's a video out of Tulsa, I believe, of a white person being pulled over where two cops are attempting to make an arrest. And it's not clear from at least the version I saw, which now has several million views. I saw it on Twitter. It's not clear how this all started. I'm sure this person was driving like a maniac, or, you don't know why the cops are so spun up. But, once they're engaging him in the car, they are, getting ready to tase him, and they do, and it doesn't work. And again, tasers often don't work. Then they begin pepper spraying him. The guy just refuses to get arrested. He does not want to come out of the car. They're trying to pull him out of the car. They don't have the skills to physically do this well, where they can keep themselves safe and actually immobilize him. So they're yanking on him every which way and shooting him with pepper spray. And the guy's complaining about the injustice of this all, and he's innocent, and that it's a violation of his rights, and why are you doing this? And had he been black, up until the final frames of this video, this would be yet another case of monstrous misbehavior on the part of cops.
I would have heard of it by now, right? Exactly. Yeah,
and in the sovereign citizen lunatic cult in white society, I'm sure it also is emblematic of the overreach of state violence. But what happens at the end of this video is this guy is wearing a t-shirt and shorts. I don't think it's even clear where he pulls the gun from. I think it probably was in his waistband. He might have retrieved it from his car as he was being pulled out. But up until the last moment where you think, okay, well, I'm not sure why they're tasing him and spraying him with pepper spray, but, the cops are really freaked out, and this guy, they're just not successfully arresting this guy. He's got his cell phone in one hand, and the next thing you know, both cops are shot. I think one has died. I'm not sure about the state of the other. And every cop knows on an hourly basis that this is a possibility every single time they have an encounter with a member of the public.
Mm-hmm.
It is absolutely obvious from the cop's eye view of the world that it is very hard to tell who the bad guys are. And we live in a society awash with guns. And so you owe it to yourself, if you're someone who has been successfully propagandized by the Black Lives Matter take on all the famous videos, you need to see a few videos like this one from Tulsa to know what cops are dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
This is a traffic stop. And, you get to watch two cops, at least one cop be executed because of it. And, that's the complete conversation about this. And so, yeah, I mean, the punchline is whatever you're being arrested for, it doesn't matter that you're innocent. You have to follow directions so as to minimize the possibility that the cop is going to feel that